Hey folks, it's time for another Star Trek video, and it's not one of those where I wrote a script and came up with a thesis and tried to, make it good. It's one of the ones where I don't really try quite as hard. It's a not actually Trek actually, and once again, it is the bottom rung of that particular ladder as well, because not only is it not actually Trek actually, it's a not actually Trek actually comment response video. There's a graphic now because some people wanted one. And I aim to please. If there is a meaning to my life, that's the meaning. I just want to make you people happy. Let's do the first comment. So this first batch of comments is from my recent video about the city on the edge of forever and wondering whether or not Harlan Ellison's original teleplay would have been better than the episode we actually got. And the first comment is from Renato Corvero, who says, "I'm a doctor, not a manslaughterer. Lines never spoken by Dr. Zoidberg." Ah, yes, I love a good Futurama Star Trek crossover joke. In fact, my favorite joke ever in Futurama, which is one of my favorite shows, and I adore Futurama. One of my favorite Futurama jokes, I believe, as I just said, it is my favorite Futurama joke, is from the Star Trek episode of Futurama that had a bunch of the Star Trek actors doing the voices, where the Star Trek heads in jars all jump off the shelf to go have their adventure, and after the front row of the Star Trek heads has gone, Jonathan Frakes' head hops up to the front of the shelf, and he's like, "All right, my time to shine." I love that. Because, of course, it's a number one joke, and it's Jonathan Frakes in Futurama. What more could you want? Now, this next one is a comment and also a reply to that comment. First, the comment is from Cast Iron Chaos, who says, "Wow, it sure was convenient that homeless guy who vaporized himself with McCoy's favor didn't alter the future in any way, as far as we know." And the reply to that comes to us from Molin1, who says, "Seems like they were trying to kill two birds with that one. Take the phaser out of play and do a version of the Trooper character, but they forgot to have anyone witness his death, so no one could pontificate about it later." I like both of these comments, but I specifically wanted to include Molin number one's reply there because that gave the death of the homeless character in the aired version of the episode a lot more meaning than it had for me before, because I always thought that scene was kind of random. He just sort of, McCoy passes out and the homeless guy kind of goes through his pockets and finds his phaser and then accidentally vaporizes himself. And I'm just like, well, gee, that was kind of pointless. I mean, if you notice, it's the same guy who is talking over Edith when Kirk and Spock are in the mission for the first time and she's about to talk, and it's the guy that Kirk says to shut up. It's the same guy who vaporizes himself. So I guess you could say that'll teach you, that'll teach you to try to talk over Edith's sermon, you piece of shit. But no, actually, the suggestion that having him destroy himself takes the phaser out of play, because McCoy is out of his head, and he's running around 1930s New York with a phaser from the 23rd century on his belt, but having the homeless guy blow himself up basically takes that out of play, and you don't have to worry about any sort of anachronisms. Of course, you could have also solved that problem by just not having McCoy have his phaser, problem solved there too. But so if you look at it that way, it actually gives a bit of logic to that otherwise completely random and meaningless death. So thank you for pointing that out, because I never really had that thought before. Here's one from Andrew Murray. "Star Trek logic, I suppose. Why are Kirk and company protected from the paradox that McCoy has created? I'm sure Doc Brown could explain it, but this is still heavy." Well, yeah, you can say Star Trek logic, but I think the generally accepted explanation is that being on the planet when the time change happens, or at least being in the immediate vicinity of the Guardian, kind of shields you from any changes in the timeline that result from a trip through the Guardian. And that's why Kirk and company could notice that things were different when they noticed that the Enterprise wasn't there, but they themselves had not been changed or erased from existence. Which is actually an explanation that doesn't work. in Ellison's teleplay, because there is that sequence where they beam back up to the ship and the ship has changed, but they themselves still have not changed. So, I mean, I guess maybe you could say, well, because they were near the Guardian when the change happened, they were permanently protected from it. But I'm not really sure if that, I mean, it works however they say it works. It's a made up story. It works however it works. But I think generally that's the commonly accepted explanation, that if you are near the Guardian when someone goes through and changes history, you will not be affected by it. You will be sort of protected by the changes. You'll be inside kind of like a time bubble, if you will. But really, that in itself is an example of Star Trek logic. So yeah, you're right. Star Trek logic is the best explanation. Next comment is from Impact Suspect. Harlan Ellison holds a grudge against everybody. Boy, ain't that the truth. Yeah, Harlan Ellison was a really brilliant writer and a miserable human being from as much as I can tell. He got a lot of mileage out of just being a grumpy old man, and I believe he was probably a grumpy old man when he was in his 20s, and he retained that grumpy old manness for the rest of his life. Speaking of whom, this one is from Ross Wheelock. I wonder what Harlan Ellison would think about the drivers of the truck that ran over Edith being ensigns from the Enterprise. I think Harlan would think, how can I get paid for that? Because that was one of Harlan's MOs, was if you want to use my work, if you want to use my talent, if you want to make use of my name or something else that I have done, you're going to have to pay me. And you know what? I completely respect that. That is one of the things about Harlan Ellison that I don't think is a problem or just something you should chalk up to him being cantankerous. He was very protective of his own work, and yes, that made him hyper litigious. And there were instances of that people mentioned in the comments, like when he sued James Cameron because he thought that the Terminator was too close to a story he had written. And there are other instances where he sued people to try to get credit or to try to get paid on questionable premises. But overall, he was a guy who was very protective of his rights as a writer and as a professional. And if you wanted to use his shit, he wanted to see some money for that, because he knew that it was a dog-eat-dog world, and if you wanted to survive, you needed to watch your ass and look out for number one and get paid. And that's what he tried to do. So I have no doubt that if the Ensign's Log ever became like a really popular podcast, if we ever got a massive audience and we were able to somehow really generate revenue from it, and we did an episode where we were riffing on the City on the Edge of Forever, I have no doubt. I don't think he would win, because I think we would be able to claim parody. We'd be able to claim satire. But I think he would absolutely try to get paid for that. And good for him. Here's one from Todd Evangelista. One thing needs to be added. D.C. Fontana did the rewrite on Ellison's original script, but never got any credit. Even in your video, it sounds like Roddenberry rewrote the script. She was told that the rewrite was necessary to make the script more Star Trek. The original script could easily have been ruined by a lesser writer. Also, while the original script was never produced, so there is nothing to compare it to, even Roddenberry couldn't make the script come in at budget. Ellison points out that he worked on Outer Limits, which had no budget and could have worked with Roddenberry if asked. Yes, the DC Fontana point is really important. I'm pretty sure I mentioned it in my video about DC Fontana that I put up last year, I think, when she passed away. But I could have and should have mentioned that in my City video as well. Yes, I believe it was the final rewrite to the shooting script, or at least the major rewrite to Ellison's most recent draft that became the shooting script was done by D.C. Fontana, and D.C. Fontana made important changes to the script that eventually became the basis for the produced episode. And in fact, I even mentioned in the City video the running gag about how Spock's computer network, his collection of vacuum tubes and wires, the stone knives and bearskins thing, that keeps getting bigger and bigger and filling up more and more of the room as we cut back to Spock working on the tricorder. That was DC Fontana's gag. She added that into the script, and that is something that I've always appreciated and that a lot of people really like about City, that little touch of humor that DC Fontana put in. And so she deserves credit for that and for the rewrite of the script just in general. She's a fantastic writer. I said in my video about her, I think she is the most important, the most consequential Star Trek writer in the history of the franchise. And I could have and should have mentioned her contribution to City on the Edge of Forever in that video. So thank you for pointing it out. Next comment is from Rob Van Jessel, who says, the easiest change to accept is the pirates aboard the former Enterprise up in orbit. You didn't need it. Nothing served the plot fine. Yeah, I agree, and that subplot was added to the script at the request of Roddenberry. I think Ellison talks about in the essay in City on the Edge Forever, in the book. In this one, I still have it within arm's reach. In the book, in his essay before the teleplay, he talks about how that was something that at the time the network was very insistent that the ship be in danger in every episode. And so Ellison added the bit about the Enterprise becoming the Condor specifically because Roddenberry had said the ship has to be in jeopardy during the episode. So that wasn't even Ellison's original idea. So yeah, losing all of that is a big improvement because I agree, you don't need it. Just having the ship not be there is enough. And last comment from the City on the Edge of Forever video from Phil G. Good show, thank you. 3 things. Upvote for the Angry Video Game Nerd reference. Why is there a black mark center of your camera lens hidden by monitor frame until you hold the book up? And the font you used for the City on the Edge title. Not a fan, LOL. Okay, well, first of all, I'm not like a huge Angry Video Game Nerd fan because I'm not really a gamer, but I've seen enough of the videos and gotten a laugh enough times that I figured I know when to make a reference and when not to. So I figured I'd throw in the Angry Video Game Nerd theme song for the bit where, the Guardian is trying to get them to come back. And yeah, the black mark that was right here, that was because the way my lights were set up for that video, I have blue lights off to the side to sort of give the blue cast to the wall behind me to make things a little more interesting in the background. And the way I had the light set up for that video, there was a reflection of the blue light that you could see in the frame of the edge of my monitor here. And that just got on my nerves. I just didn't think it looked right. So I fixed it by just putting a black patch over it. A very crude attempt to fix it. And unfortunately, I forgot to take the patch out for all of the times when something would pass in front. So when my head passed in front of it or when I held up the book, you could see it for a few frames. And yeah, it's annoying. It's annoying. I wish that I had done a better job of that so that it wasn't as noticeable. Or actually, what I really wish is that I had just put the goddamn light in the right place so that there wasn't something to try to fix in the first place. But that's what that patch was. There's nothing wrong with the camera. It was an intentional accident because the patch was there on purpose to fix a mistake, and it just created a subsequent mistake because I didn't do it right, because I'm just a fool doing this by myself. I've been doing videos on YouTube for 10 years. I make my living doing this, and every once in a while, I still screw things up because I'm only human. I'm only human, okay? I make mistakes. Don't put your blame on me. These next several comments are from my most recent Trek Actually video, which was my tribute to Christopher Plummer and General Chang. This one is from Polygon Alchemist, who says, I just loved how his eye patch is bolted onto his friggin' skull. So metal. Yeah, can you imagine a Klingon just having like a strap? These are the things that Klingons would bully each other about. Klingons are these big, tough, macho guys, and if a Klingon lost an eye, and he had that eye patch, it was just like a strap, and it wasn't screwed into the bones of his face, that's something that like a Klingon would get like a swirly over that. You'd get like pushed into a locker if you were a Klingon. Even if you lost your eye in honorable combat, you put that patch over it, and you put a piece of elastic to hold it onto your head, or like a tie or something. No. You need to screw it into your ocular bone, okay? You need to screw here on the cheek, screw here on the forehead. You need to bolt it onto your face, or you are no Klingon. You are no warrior. You have no honor. Next one is from John Miller, who says, Chang convinces me even more that Klingons are de-evolving. In the time of TOS, Klingons were still technologically advancing. They still seemed to value intelligence. By the time of TNG, they no longer seemed to be advancing, and as a society, they seemed to be moving backward toward their warrior way. The difference now, though, is that they have fallen behind technologically, as well as no longer doing things in a smart way. They'd rather be super aggressive. In fact, whenever someone like Worf mentions a better, smarter way, he's usually looked down upon. Yeah, and some of that, especially in the case of Worf, is probably just to create a contrast, to show that Worf was brought up the Starfleet way, and even though he is Klingon, he is not like other Klingons. But it might also be sort of an example of an entire species being flanderized, because if you can have that trope for an entire group of characters, not just for a particular character, because it seems like in the TOS movies, and then really, especially in Next Gen, when they started developing Klingon culture, and they decided, okay, they're going to be an honor culture, and honor and battle and being a warrior and being brave is going to be very important to them, and they're going to be this sort of aggressive, warlike species. And slowly but surely, all the nuance kind of was drained out of them, so that they were just this thing. And efforts have been made, with Deep Space Nine and to an extent with Discovery in the first season of Discovery especially, with varying degrees of success, to try and add some sophistication and some complexity back into them, because they were sort of flattened out and they just became like, oh, Klingons, they like to fight. And, they became almost a parody where it's like they're difficult to take them seriously as a real culture because they become so one note. Here's one from MF Bandy. I love the one joke in the beginning when Spock says, there's an old Vulcan proverb, only Nixon can go to China. And I'm pretty sure that is a Nicholas Meyer joke, and it's one of the reasons why I think Nicholas Meyer is the best director of Star Trek ever, and one of the best writers as well, because he co-wrote Star Trek 6, and he also co-wrote Star Trek 4, which he didn't direct, and he also, I believe he co-wrote Star Trek 2, which of course he did direct. He just has a really good sense of humor, and he is not a hardcore Star Trek nerd, so he's not as precious about it, so he will throw little jokes in like that, like having Spock say, only Nixon can go to China is an old Vulcan proverb, having Gorkon say, you haven't experienced Shakespeare until you have read him in the original Klingon, which, as I said in the video, is one of my favorite Star Trek jokes ever, and also having Spock say, an ancestor of mine maintains that once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth, which is, as everybody knows, hopefully, a Sherlock Holmes quote. So Spock is saying that Sherlock Holmes is an ancestor of his, which is suggesting either that Spock himself is making a joke, or that Sherlock Holmes is real in the Star Trek universe, not a fictional character, and that he is an ancestor of Spock. Which doesn't make sense because in The Next Generation, Data enjoys going to Sherlock Holmes holodeck programs and playing Sherlock Holmes, which suggests that Sherlock Holmes is a fictional character in the Star Trek universe and didn't actually live just like in our universe. So it doesn't make any sense, which is one of the reasons I love it. I love jokes like that he just said, you know what, I'm going to have Spock say this, because Nicholas Myers, he is a Sherlock nerd. He's a huge Sherlock Holmes nerd. And, he even wrote a Sherlock Holmes novel called the 7% Solution that he later made into a film that he directed. And so he's a much bigger, I think, Sherlock Holmes nerd than he is a Star Trek nerd. And he threw that Holmes reference in there for Spock. I think it's terrific. I love stuff like that. I wish Star Trek did that kind of thing more often. Yeah, great joke. Great joke. Here's one from Space Pirate Captain Rush about the grandparent looking like descendant thing. If my dad looks like a carbon copy of my long since passed grandpa, and if I wasn't a trans woman, there's a very strong likelihood I would have ended up looking really close as well. It can happen. It can happen to the point that there's a very strong resemblance. Like, I agree about that. In fact, let me skip ahead to another comment. There's a comment from Radical Bacon who says, what, no pictures of your grandfather for comparison? Okay, so here's a picture of me in high school. This is my high school senior picture that I've shown on live streams before, but this is me at like age 17, okay? And this is my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, who maybe some of you have heard me talk about in videos in the past, my pap, one of the most important people in my whole life. This is him at roughly the same age when he joined the Navy. This is Pap at about age 17 or 18, okay? Really, really strong resemblance, I think, between the two of us at those ages. We look a lot alike. In fact, the first time I saw that picture of my pap, I was struck by how closely we resembled each other. But are we twins? No, we are not. Are we so closely resembling each other that you could mistake one of us for the other? No. My point about the two Worfs is, they're played by the same actor, right? And that is a trope that we see throughout, television and movies, where if you're gonna have a character's dad, or you're gonna have a character's mother or grandmother or grandfather or ancestor, whatever, they're played by the same actor that plays the character. So they look exactly alike. They have the same voice. They have similar mannerisms. They're the same person. And that, I will be quite insistent, does not actually happen in real life. But are there super strong resemblances? Yes. Oh, obviously. Of course there are. And I think me and my pap is an example of that. And I'm sure there are those of you watching that have even better examples where you look a lot like a grandparent or a great-grandparent or whoever. I'm not denying that at all. But so closely resembling each other that you look like exactly the same person, I'm less willing to believe that. Here's one from the Darth Eddie, who says, one upside to Chang's makeup design is that you can easily picture him as still retaining physical traits from the augment Klingon era of his empire's history. One could say his more subtle cranial ridges and bumps could be because of the treatments he received earlier in life to reverse the effects of the augment virus. Absolutely. Someone could definitely do that. But this increasingly hypothetical someone would not be me. Here's one from G.N. Shapiro. Was Fred Rowlett a Johnny Carson reference, Steve? If so, well done, my man. I also like the Sound of Music joke at the end. Yes, that was a Johnny Carson reference. Fred D. Cordova was the longtime executive producer of The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. And when Johnny would have a guest on who had brought a clip during the years that Fred De Cordova was the producer, he would say Fred Rowlett. That was absolutely a reference to The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. I'm so gratified that you got it. You may be the only one because nobody else mentioned it, but I wanted to point that out, that yes, that was definitely a Johnny Carson reference and you totally got it. So good for you and good for me. Good for both of us. Shepard1707 says, all right, listen to me. You have to play Klingon Academy, or at least watch a Let's Play of it. It's such a fantastic game, and there is such a great performance from Plummer. I got a couple of comments like this on the video, so I did go back on YouTube and find that collection of just all of the cutscenes from the game that I think I had watched some of a few years ago, which is how I knew that Plummer was in the game to begin with. And I watched a few minutes of it, and it was okay, but honestly, it's not really my thing. Watching a Let's Play just isn't going to happen. One of the things that still to this day mystifies me about the internet is the incredible ubiquity and popularity of Let's Play videos and of Twitch streams now where people just stream themselves playing games and people watch. I just don't get that. I don't get why it's fun to watch other people play video games. I find it just unimaginably tedious. But if that's your thing, please, more power to you. I'm not trying to take a shit on something that other people like. It's not my thing, at all. But I did watch a few minutes of the Chang scenes from the Klingon Academy game. And yeah, Plummer seems like he was game. He showed up to work. He's good. I didn't watch the whole thing because honestly, it's over 2 hours of stuff and there's just no fucking way I'm going to watch 2 hours of cutscenes from a video game I didn't even play. I'm sorry. I'm just not going to do that. It just doesn't interest me. But the little bit that I did watch, yeah, Christopher Plummer seemed like he did a good job as Chang, so good for him. Now, these next several comments are from my previous comment response video, and this first one is from James D., who says, if you watch In the Pale Moonlight again, you can see that Jadzia not only would have known full well what Sisko did after their conversations, she actually kinda incepts the broad plan into Sisko's mind in the first place, and keeps gently pushing Sisko in the right direction throughout the episode. People think Garrick is sneaky, but she's totally the shadowy mastermind behind the whole thing. Now that I think about it, Terry Farrell would make a pretty decent Lady Macbeth, wouldn't she? Yeah. Here's one from Alexander Injet. Yeah, while I get the scene where Kirk is being demoted and Into Darkness is good, it would have been better if he had been sent back to the academy to actually finish his education and then being sent off to actually serve his time as an ensign and earn his way up. He was a third-year cadet on a 4-year education program who spent no time at all as an ensign or any other type of position other than being promoted to first officer by Pike when he made Spock acting captain in his absence, which is ridiculous to begin with. There would be others below Spock who already were next in line, like the bridge officers, etc. He showed that he had great potential, but he sure as shit should not have been the captain. I both agree with you and disagree with you here. I do think that it would have been possible and perhaps even preferable to have written the 2009 Star Trek in such a way so that Kirk doesn't get jumped straight from cadet to captain of the Enterprise. It does feel like they give him command of the Enterprise at the very end of the movie because they decided that they wanted everyone to be in their familiar places by the end of the movie, even if that didn't really make a lot of sense in the context of the story that they had told. So I do feel like that feels like a little bit of a cheat to say, oh, and in recognition for, saving the Federation from Nero, we're going to graduate you summarily from the academy and grant you a commission as captain, even though you're still a cadet at this point. Like, okay, fine. It seems like a cheat, right? But they did it in Star Trek 09. So in Into Darkness, I really do not think it would have been a wise move at all to send Kirk back to the academy, to even have Pike mention that he could be sent back to the academy. I feel like the best thing to do at that point, now that you made the first movie and you established that, the second movie and going forward, just move away from that. Just don't even bring attention to it because it feels like a little bit of sloppy screenwriting, but it's established and you're going to stick with it, so just move along. So I really think it would have been a big mistake to have Pike mention the possibility of sending Kirk back to the academy and then having him go through the usual route of being an ensign and a lieutenant, etc., etc. That's not the direction that I would want to go with it at all. Just keep moving away from that weird little decision at the end of Star Trek 09 to jump him straight to the captain's chair. No. Here's one from Kyle Brown. Also, every time you do a comment response video, I wait for comment response to pop up on screen, just as you're saying it's a not actually Trek actually comment response video, but it never does, and that makes me sad. Well, are you happy now, Kyle? You're the reason I did that at the beginning, and I bet you watched that. I bet you watched that and a little smile came over your face, and you were like, oh, he did it. I wonder if he did it because of my comment. Yeah, I did it because of your comment. You know what you did? You made extra work for me. I had to make an extra graphic. I had to put it in there. I had to do a little animation so that it would pop up because you specified in your comment. You said pop up, right? So it can't just appear. It has to pop up, and I did it. I made it pop up, Kyle, for you, and I hope you're happy. I hope you appreciate it. Seriously, though, I hope you appreciate it. Hope it made you feel good. Hope it made you feel real. Oh, God. I just, I mean, no, but seriously, I really, it was my pleasure, and I hope you enjoyed it. I seriously mean it this time. I'm not building up to get angry again for a joke. I mean, I hope you enjoyed it. I really hope you fucking appreciate it, Kyle. Just Aloe says, In the Pale Moonlight is my favorite episode in the entire Star Trek canon, and now, thanks to this video, I'm going to watch it again with new eyes and pick up on all of the clues I missed. Thanks, guys. What do you mean, guys? What guys? There's only one guy. It's just me doing these videos. Nobody else is in here. Nobody else is helping me with this, which I think was proven by a couple videos ago, and I had that black thing in here that was screwing things up, right? This is just me doing this. There's no guys. Who are you talking about? Who's the other guy? Eat shit, Vince. Here's one from Keltar King. Hey, Steve, could you link me to your video about the 300 movie? I've heard you mention your disdain for it several times, and while I don't see the movie the same way, I'd like to have a better view of your analysis. Thanks. I have never done a video about 300, but Jason Harding and I did review 300 on an episode of our movie review podcast, Late Seating, and I will link that for you. That is actually linked in the description of this video if you want to hear more about why I don't like 300, why I hate 300, why 300 is one of the few movies where I can earnestly use the word hate to describe how I feel about it. We go into it in laborious and, may I say, hilarious detail in our review on Late Seating. So that is linked in the description of this video. But no, I've never actually done a video about 300. Here's one from You Can't Have My Name, my wonderful viewers who I would never address in an unduly aggressive tone, except when Steve starts talking about conservatives. I do specify in that quote that I am talking about my wonderful viewers, not my conservative viewers. My conservative viewers and all other conservatives can piss off and die. Now, this next batch of comments is taken from my video reviewing Season 3 of Star Trek Discovery. And this first one is from Trans Gamer Girl, who says, "To me, the cramped nature of all the subplots, lack of bridge crew development, and the unearned developments all stem from the same issue, the shortness of the seasons compared to older Trek. It's like they try to fit a full season into half the number of episodes. I feel they really needed 4 to 6 extra episodes and character pieces that had little to nothing to do with the main A or B plots of the season. Basically, the fluff episodes from old Trek that were there just to stretch the season to a full 22 to 24 episodes. I guess that is the trouble with shows made for streaming platforms. Seasons have to be more efficient at the cost of some of the heart. I've mentioned that in my videos as well, that I feel like they have too many ideas for too few episodes, and you have proposed the opposite solution to what I have proposed. You say, well, give them more episodes so they have more room to explore these ideas and sort of give the season room to breathe. My solution would be keep the number of episodes, continue to do 10 or 13 or 15 episodes a season. Just make some choices as far as what you put in the season. If you have a great idea, but there's not room for it this year, well, just pull it out, give what's left room to breathe, and maybe next season you can work in the stuff about the Borg, right? You know, that was my big problem. One of my problems with Star Trek Picard is that they have, oh, look, there's a bunch of Romulan stuff, there's a bunch of Borg stuff, there's all this stuff about androids, like there's so much stuff. It's all got potential to be great, but like, we have 10 episodes. There's not enough room for all of this. So just take the Borg stuff completely out. We don't need that. We can explore that later. You know, we don't need to have it right now. And don't forget it. Don't just throw it in the waistband. The waistband? What's that? Don't throw it in the waistpan or waste can or whatever. Keep it. Save it for later. But just don't use it right now. So that will be my solution. Your solution is more episodes. My solution is just trim what is in the episodes so that you're not cramming so much into such a short space. Either way, I think the problem is the same, and I think we agree on that. This next comment is from Frantic. I kind of have a bit of contention with the point on Tilly being promoted. I think what the intention was to normalize anxiety disorders, which is noble enough. At the same time, it is a bit world-breaking that someone with severe anxiety would be given such a crucial role in a life-and-death situation. So I'm kind of conflicted about it, and I think it could have been set up better, even though I think it was well-meaning. I actually like Tilly a lot in the same way I liked Barclay. It's just they really need to give this character development more breathing room, in my opinion. I see what you're saying, but I think we need to look at the totality of Tilly's character development throughout the series to this point. Because, yeah, anxiety is a part of her character. Nervousness and lack of self-confidence is a part of her character, but that's not the only trait she has. And she is not like that all the time in every situation with everybody. For instance, I think about, there have been a couple of scenes where the characters are having parties, you know, where like there's a party in the mess hall, or there are groups of people socializing and hanging out, and Tilly seems fine. Like, she seems to be getting along with people, you know, she's like, she's capable of being comfortable and, you know, being flirtatious and dancing and interacting with people. So she's not the same as Barclay. Like, Barclay talks about how he gets social anxiety at parties and doesn't feel comfortable around people and doesn't know what to do with his hands, doesn't know what to talk about. And Tilly doesn't seem to have that issue all the time. There are particular instances where she seems to have that issue, but she also seems to be capable of socializing, quote unquote, normally in other ways. So presenting her as the first officer and putting her in a position where she needs to be more authoritative and she needs to put her foot down, I don't think is a contradiction of her character that we've seen so far. I think we've seen enough different facets of her that we can know that the anxiety is not the only thing that makes her who she is. And when she is put in a position where she has more authority over people, she might balk at it like she does, and she might wonder if she can do it. But when she needs to step up and do it, she's capable of doing that. Morris Foston says, is it me or did Stamets still seem upset with Burnham even after getting his family back together? Oh, no, that was definitely intentional. Yeah, I think that was absolutely intentional, that he gives Burnham a look. They kind of share a glance at near the end of the episode when he is reunited with Adira and Culber, but he still seems to bear a bit of a grudge against Burnham because, that's not just you. That's definitely there intentionally, and hopefully that's something that will be picked up in the upcoming season. Travis Games says, caring about some continuity is essential. No, I agree. Caring about continuity is important. I don't think writers should just completely throw continuity out the window. I do think internal consistency matters for a story. But when you get out to the level of franchise, and especially when you're talking about a franchise like Star Trek that has been around for decades and has passed through so many different hands, I am not nearly as concerned about maintaining continuity throughout the entire franchise, right? Continuity within an episode? Absolutely. Continuity within a series? Sure, yeah, as much as possible, right? Continuity within an entire franchise that spans decades with hundreds of creative people that have touched it, not really that worried about it. Not really that worried about it. That's why something like that Sherlock Holmes line that Spock has in Star Trek VI that was referenced in an earlier comment in this video, where Spock seems to imply that Sherlock Holmes was a real person and was an ancestor of his, despite the fact that in The Next Generation, it's pretty obvious that Sherlock Holmes in the Star Trek universe is meant to have been a fictional character, and Data is playing this fictional character in holographic recreations of his stories. Those two don't mesh. Like they can't both be true, right? Sherlock Holmes cannot have been both a fictional and non-fictional person in the Star Trek universe. I don't care. And I know you can come up with a headcanon with it and say, well, maybe Sherlock Holmes was a real person, but Dr. Watson still published his exploits, so the stories exist, but also the real character, the real person exists. Yeah, I guess, fine. If you feel the need to do that, I don't even feel the need to do that. I'm capable of just having it be, it's a contradiction. It's one thing seems to be true in the movie, another thing seems to be true in this TV series, and that's fine with me. I don't care. It doesn't affect my enjoyment of either one of them. It doesn't break my suspension of disbelief because I know that it's a fake made-up TV show anyway, and it just doesn't take me out of it. And that's the kind of thing that I mean when I say continuity isn't important. Continuity should be secondary to a lot of other things. Not that it doesn't matter at all, and not that a writer doesn't have an obligation to try to get things right in terms of continuity and internal consistency. I do think that is part of the craft, but it's not always the most important thing. I feel like that's sort of my feeling on continuity and how much it matters. Here's one from Kevin Thomas. I think Discovery is doing an awesome job of addressing social issues and in showing LGBTQ people in a positive, nay, heroic light. I still wish they had tried a little harder when it came to science and nerdy stuff. I think we're going to have to agree to disagree on this one. I think that Discovery has done a better job of incorporating real or real-ish science into its stories than other Star Trek shows have. There have been a couple of examples in the show so far where they encounter some kind of Star Trek thing and the on-screen explanation for it is like a real science thing. Like when the the seed ark that they have to find in an episode from season 3. And the seed ark, the family that was watching over the seed ark was killed because they were exposed to radiation as a result of, I think it was a mass coronal ejection from a star, which is a real thing. Like, that's a real thing that happens. They could have just made up some Star Trek shit, but they didn't. They used a real thing. And they've done that a couple of other times in Discovery as well, where they actually, you can tell that they have a science advisor or the writers made an effort to find a legitimate, actual astronomical phenomenon that they can use to explain what's happening in the Star Trek show. So I think the science is actually at least as good as it's been in previous Star Trek shows, if not better. I mean, I know people like to say like, oh, but the spore drive, right? But, I hate to tell you, warp drive and subspace are just as made up as the spore drive, So I really don't think that Discovery is any worse in terms of the science than other Star Trek shows have been. And you might feel differently, which is cool, but I disagree. Serious Sketch says, Steve, you've been really angry lately. Correction, I have been acting really angry lately. Because hopefully it's entertaining and funny for people to see, and also it's just a lot of fun to play. Like, it's a lot of fun to pretend to be angry for comic effect. If I've been overdoing it, and I know I've done it a couple of times in this video, so if I've been overdoing it, I apologize. I'll try to be a little more creative when it comes to coming up with bits, but I haven't really been angry. I'm not that angry. I'm not any more angry lately than I usually am, but it's a bit. So if I'm overusing the bit, I apologize. I'll try to be a little more creative. Here's one from Chadrick Glossop. It's not Nevar. Navar, like Navar. Lord have mercy, LOL. Okay, but I mean, seriously, give me a break. Okay, I grew up in and still live in Western Maryland, which is the rural, like, super conservative part of the state. I did go to college. I do have an English education from college, but the college I went to is in West Virginia. What I'm saying is I'm kind of a hick. So give me a break if every once in a while a Nevar comes out. I can't always hold it in. I've tried so hard to create the impression of an erudite and sophisticated man of letters as I have made these Star Trek videos on YouTube. But every once in a while, the hayseed comes out, and I have to, and I end up saying something like, the Vulcans and the Romulans, they all live on the same planet now, and they call it Nevar, right? I apologize. And finally, these last few comments come from my video on what if Captain Picard had not been rescued by the Borg. This one is from Misha Sumra, who says, in that alternative version of the Pegasus, Riker's sense of duty and responsibility to his crew would have been overwhelming. And you know what that means? It means he wouldn't have to spend hours dicking about in a holographic reconstruction of the NX-01 in order to find his spine. A definite improvement. Well, there you go. If they had killed off Captain Picard or written him out of the show and Patrick Stewart had left Next Generation at the beginning of the 4th season and Riker had taken over as captain, maybe Next Gen would have suffered as a result of Patrick Stewart's absence, but in the long run, it would have improved the ending of Star Trek Enterprise, and I feel like we could all get behind that, right? Except maybe Jonathan Frakes, because he probably would have wanted, to get that guest star payday. Mick Quack, I am the cutest of Borg. That's clever. I love a good pun, but, it doesn't work all the way because we know that Locutus was not actually the cutest of Borg. We know who the cutest of Borg was, don't we? Right? I mean, come on, look at his little cheeks. Look at his little Borg cheeks. John Buss, I feel like this whole episode is a version of Tapestry with Steve as Q telling Patrick Stewart how, because he left after season 3, he never became so popular, never got the part of Professor Xavier, never became a cultural icon, etc., etc. Meanwhile, Jonathan Frakes ended up straight in the front row of the Head Museum in New York in the year 3000. There's that Futurama joke came back again. My favorite Futurama joke. God damn it. You might think I did that on purpose, setting it up earlier. I completely forgot about this comment when I said the Futurama thing before. So yes, favorite Futurama joke. And and Tapestry is one of my favorite TNG episodes. So I really enjoy having one of my videos compared, even facetiously, to Tapestry and having me compared to Q. I like that. I can dig that. I'd be a decent Q, I think. All you have to do is just wreak havoc and not give a shit. I can do that. Come on. I can't snap my fingers, though. I'd have to do another thing. I'd have to do like this thing, or like whatever the hell she was doing in True Q, where she's like, she does like kind of some sort of Samantha Bewitched thing. No, Samantha does the wiggle. Okay. So not Samantha from Bewitched, but like Wanda from WandaVision. She kind of goes, she does some shit with her hands. I'd have to do something like that. I have to come up with a thing, Maybe mine could be like sipping tea with the pinky up. Whenever I do some Q shit, I'd be like, ba-ding. That's dumb. That's not it. It's got to be something. I'll figure out something. By the time I get Q powers, I'll have figured out my thing. Tyron Koji says, I mean, that cube would still have been defeated. They underestimated Starfleet. Now, if they had sent 2 cubes, that's the end of days. That's true unless, of course, the Starfleet ship they were facing was the USS Voyager, which is apparently indestructible and capable of destroying entire fleets of Borg vessels all by itself. Fernando Nogales says, we kind of see one of those possibilities in Parallels, where Picard was not rescued from the Borg and the Federation was in big trouble because of that. Yeah, that was something that a lot of people pointed out that I could have made reference to in the video and didn't, so I want to make sure to include Fernanda's comment, sort of stand for all of those comments of people who said, what about Parallels? Yes, there was that brief glimpse of a future or of an alternate reality in Parallels where Captain Riker was in charge of the Enterprise and Picard was dead and the Borg had taken over. But of course, there was also another reality that Worf passes through in that episode where Picard was dead and Riker was the captain, and things did not seem nearly as bad as in the one where the long bearded Riker is like, the Borg are everywhere. So it wouldn't necessarily have turned out that way, but that was definitely a possibility. Dotan Cohen says, another regular, often seen in a red Starfleet uniform, might have been fit for the first officer position, someone with far more experience in both exploration and diplomacy than the entire Federation combined. Q. Now see, if Next Gen had been a slightly different show, if they had had a little bit more in terms of story arcs as opposed to self-contained episodes, and they wanted to do a story maybe for the first few episodes after Picard exits the show where Riker has to decide who his first officer is instead of resolving that right away, a Q episode where Q shows up and he's like, hey, Captain Riker, I heard that the first officer position is vacant. I'd like to volunteer my services. And he sort of insists on acting as first officer for an episode. Like, that is the basis of an awesome Q episode. And would be a great way to sort of reboot Q's relationship with Riker and establish that as a thing going forward for the rest of the series. So you would still have reasons for Q to come back. That's a great idea. That's a great idea. Maybe have the episode after the resolution of the cliffhanger and Picard is gone and Riker is like, oh, now who am I going to promote to be my first officer? And Q shows up and that's a Q episode with Q, auditioning to be first officer. That's a great idea. Oh, I would love to see that episode. And finally, Peter Wood says, there's a lot of talk about the summer of 1990, but I saw it pointed out recently that there were years between when Spock died and when he was resurrected. That's true, and there were also comments from people who said, I was a fan of the show in the 60s when it went off the air, and I had to wait, I think, 5 years for the animated series, 10 years for the movie. We had to wait longer than a single summer. A little bit different because it wasn't a cliffhanger. And even like the death of Spock, I do feel like the door was left open for Spock to come back, obviously, at the end of Star Trek II, but that wasn't really a promise. It wasn't really a cliffhanger. It was, well, if this movie does well and we do another one, we can bring Spock back. We've left the door open. But it wasn't a cliffhanger. Star Trek II didn't end on a cliffhanger. Star Trek II was a complete story. Best of Both Worlds Part 1 ended on a cliffhanger. It basically said, you have to come back and see the end of this. It literally says to be continued at the end. So it's not quite the same. Yes, it's a longer wait between Star Treks 2 and 3, but when Star Trek 2 came out, you weren't promised a Star Trek 3. When Star Trek, the original series, went off the air, you weren't promised any more Star Trek. When Best of Both Worlds Part 1 went off the air, They promised more Star Trek. They said, this story isn't finished yet. You're going to have to wait and see what the resolution is. So even though it wasn't nearly as long as the years between the other things in those other examples, it's a different kind of wait when you know that something's coming and they're saying you're going to have to wait to see what it is. Maybe that's better, maybe it's worse. Your mileage may vary, but it's different. It's a very different thing. Anyway, that was the last comment. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a great day wherever you are. If you're watching this during the week, I hope you have a great rest of the week. If you're watching this when there's a weekend, I hope you have a great weekend. I will be back in a couple of weeks for the next Trek Actually video, the next proper one, which will be on the subject of why do people actually hate new Star Trek? Which I think is a topic that I have talked a lot about and thought a lot about, and certainly there are plenty of opinions about the relative merits of new Star Trek and, the J.J. Abrams movies and the CBS All Access, now Paramount Plus series like Discovery and Picard. There's all kinds of opinions about new Star Trek. And we'll talk about that and why some people seem to not really like it so much. Should be an interesting discussion. Don't forget patreon.com/Steve Shives. If you dig what I do and you want to support this YouTube channel, it also, in addition to helping me continue to make videos, becoming a patron also allows you to vote in the polls for upcoming Trek Actually topics. And there is one such poll live right now that you can go vote in that will choose the topic for May's video, I believe. So you can check that out. April's, not May's, April's, because we're in March now. Whichever the next one that hasn't been chosen, that one, whichever that one is. Anyway, if you become a patron or you are a patron, you can vote to choose. Also, don't forget the Ensign's Log, the Star Trek themed comedy podcast. We're currently in hiatus at the end of our 3rd season, which is a great time to catch up before we start recording for the 4th season, which will be starting in a few weeks. So that's it. That's all I've got for you. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you all for the wonderful comments that allow me to do these videos every once in a while, to do comment responses. And take care, everybody. See you next time.